Lakini yale ambayo wanafanya saa hii ni kama siasa. Siasa ambayo inawekwa kwa ile maneno hata kufunika ile labda maneno ya sukari. Kwa hivyo milioni 8 ni pesa kidogo. Hata kama si wametupeleka watu karibu 9. Wangetuambia turudishe, badala wangekuwa nafuatilia watu ambao wameleta sukari ya mabilioni. Kwa hivyo mimi nasema ya kwamba nafikiri tumewasiliana na mawakili wetu. Ikiwa tutashikwa tutaenda na tutajitetea. Lakini kusingiziwa maneno ati kwamba kaunti ilipoteza pesa, hiyo ni uongo. Ati pesa ilikuwa imetumwa kule Germany, hiyo ni maneno ya uongo. Tulikuwa tunafanya Madam Ri biashara akiwa amefungua account katika Family Bank Kisumu.
Welcome back to the program. Of course, that is Governor Sospeter Ojaamong, Busia County Governor, reacting to that directive from the Director of Public Prosecution, who has approved the prosecution of the governor following corruption scandal there in his county. Still in studio, I have Evans Wafula and Abel Oyeyo. And Abel, let me begin with you now. You've heard the governor there, of course, saying that he's being targeted for political reasons. We are over that. But let's focus on something that he just mentioned, that 8 million shillings is not that much. I mean, that is not something that the taxpayer will take lightly.
Well, I think what is true, the governor is a politician, and he knows if he plays politics with the case, he can easily bring it down. And that is the kind of, I'd have no doubt that the DPP most likely has a waterproof case. But you see now, it's not tight when it comes to politics. So he's playing into what the minds of Kenyans are actually having at the moment. When you look at 8 million, it's a very small amount of money when compared to the huge figures we've been hearing in the, NWS scandal, 9 billion and all that. He knows if he talks about 8 million in comparison to sugar, fertilizer, and NYS, Kenyans will side with him, and that is what he's doing. So if the DPP and the ESCC have to be trusted and to be supported by Kenyans, they have to begin from the center. They have to begin by prosecuting the big cases. Again, I agree with Wafula when he talked about the lack of seriousness from the ESCC. Actually, that is what has led Kenyans lose confidence in the entire battle against corruption. So the governor knows the weak points and is playing right into it. As we speak now, Kenyans actually side with him. There's no way you're going to tell us to focus on 8 million when 9 billion is lost. You see? And he's getting it. So
Evans clearly, let me bring Evans to this. Evans clearly, once again, there's a very thin line between these two issues, the war on corruption and politics. I mean, how best can we separate these two issues?
I think I'm totally embarrassed, and it's so shameful for a leader, the standing of a governor, to suggest that 8 million that is lost is totally nothing, and try to divert the attention of the public to a crime that has actually also... A crime is a crime. That is the point I'm trying to drive. That a crime is a crime. Corruption is corruption. I said corruption never hides. Yet the axe has fallen on him. He should bear the consequences and let the law take its course. You see, the problem here with our leaders is that once you have done something, you rally your people. Most of them don't even understand what's going on in their counties. You rally people behind you and start talking politics. I think the time for politicians who have been implicated in corruption to hide in politics, those times have gone. I think it's important for the people to know that if you look at a chicken thief is jailed for years. And then we say that because he stole a chicken, he should be released. Then someone who has stolen, who has broken into your house and stolen everything, should be let go. I think there's a contradiction. I think the most important here is that let leaders know that they'll be held to account.
I think Evans, your analogy there has best captured that explanation there from your end. Let's talk about this very interesting issue. And if my director can allow me, let me get that County Governments Act, I believe 2012, with regards to the role of governors and whether they should be accountable when it comes to matters corruption. We're going to get that graphics for you shortly. Let me just quote that County Governors Act, and it says, quote unquote, the governors shall be accountable for the management and the use of the county resources. And Abel, this is where I want to bring you in. The county government, of course, has various departments. There's the finance department, the procurement and everything. So does it mean that the buck ends with the governor, despite, these other officials having committed maybe crimes without the knowledge of the governor?
Yeah, okay. According to the Act, most of the powers are vested, in the office of the governor. And that is why I think when there's an issue of corruption, it goes all the way to the governor. And there's a problem of lack of understanding of how devolution works. So most of the guys who work under the governor actually end up consulting with the governor. And I think the DPP and the EACC understand that. That is why most of the corruption cases have to be followed all the way to the governor. So for a governor who wants to be free, who wants to make sure he's in the right books with, the anti-corruption agencies, he has to make sure actually abides by the law. Because at the end of the day, the buck stops with the governor. That is why even in national governments, when we have all these scandals of corruption, we blame the president. Yeah.
And Evans, do you think the buck stops with governors when it comes to corruption in county governments?
Absolutely. The county governments are a reflection of the national government. When you talk about the buck must stop with the president, where there's corruption, with the same way say that the buck must stop with the governors. I think the governors must to take account to whatever is happening in the counties. And remember one thing is that even at the county level, we have committees at the county assemblies. There are budgets come into the county assemblies and pass. The problem is that governors have become demagogues. You see, most governors, when they came into the office, they actually assumed excess power that they thought that maybe they're able to do. Most of them, even this, if there's an investigation that might actually even be carried further, for example, what is this company, Madam R? What is this company? Even a company that appears even suspicious. Some of these companies belong even to governors and their friends and relatives. I think it's important that this case to be used as a classical case, because the problem in Busia is actually not only there. I'm very sure that this problem is virtually in every county. And if investigations are let to happen everywhere, I'm sure most of these governors will have cases. And as I said before, is that we need to have people who can be able to investigate these corruption cases properly and bring watertight evidence so that people can be prosecuted.
Now, Abel, I understand you've already called for the need to bring the fish, the big fish apparently, they should be arrested when it comes to corruption. That's what basically you've said. And we've seen other cases, with regards to other governors before, it never saw the light of the day, where in other cases, courts actually are the ones who've come in and stopped investigation. Do you believe with this case facing Busia Governor Sospeter Ojaamong, do you believe it's going to see the light of the day?
Well, I think, number one, I'm going to call the case a storm in a teacup. This is a very small case. And unfortunately, my friend is talking about the significance of prosecuting a very small case, like, a thief is a thief, whether he's stolen a chicken or 10 billion. I'm going to say a thief is not a thief. There's what we call functional pragmatism versus what we call church or religious dogma. In the church, we told that sin is a sin. You pinch me, you've committed a very big sin. You kill someone, you will still go to hell. That is it. In the church, it works. But in life, it doesn't work. Someone who stole, we've spent so much time prosecuting chicken thieves, and we've let the big fish go. That is why we lost so much money. We have to begin with the big fish. And for us to get the political goodwill to prosecute all these cases and actually deal with corruption accordingly, we have to get the guys who steal big money first. That is when such cases can be taken serious. Kenyans are not going to buy this unless the guys who've stolen big money are brought to book.
I think, Abel, the question is not whether Kenyans are going to buy this or not. The question was very clear. In previous cases, we've seen the courts coming in, stopping investigation, and, basically giving those in question a chance to not be prosecuted. So do you believe this time round we're going to see successful kind of prosecution? Or we've already seen the EACC and the DPP already working together?
Because, of course, the governor has come out and said what he did was very clean. On the other hand, the DPP says there is a case. So what we'll do is to just let the fullness of time disclose what's going to happen.
Evans?
I think, to answer you that, I think what we don't only want to see the prosecution taking place, but we want to see someone going to prison because of this particular case. Because the problem here is that when the big fish, the so-called big fish, are implicated, they usually have this tendency of saying that, okay, well, I'll pay the bail, or I will be released, or this is political. I think we need to be very clear that now if the law is allowed to take its course, and I'm emphasizing that, is that now we have there's a watertight case. What we want to see at the end of the day, we want to see the first governor being actually prosecuted and being jailed. I think ultimately is that if there's evidence that all these things are being alleged took place, then there's no way we can start not speculating whether there's a crime took place or not. It's very clear. The charges are very clear. I think my colleagues saw the charges when you read them and when you showed on the screen. The charges are very clear. They're almost over 8 charges. So I think it's important for us to say that we do not only want to see people who reach the corridors of justice, and then the following day you find them using the same proceeds of corruption. I think it's important that the governor should actually be an example. And I think Busia County and all the residents of Busia County know that Busia County should not be perceived to be a crime of sin because of one governor.
Okay. Now, Abel, let's talk about the 600 billion plus shillings. I am sure this is where you're going to enjoy the most, that it is being lost from our budget every single year through corruption. And there are a lot of people who've been talking about the need to have some sort of a multi-agency approach to it, where, you know, all these other agencies, EACC, DPP, all of them should be seen working hand in hand. Why is it always on paper and not in practical? We're not seeing it being, you know, in reality.
That is because of the nature of corruption. Corruption, like my friend said, I think that is why I'm going to agree with him, is an enterprise. And previously, you know, some guys have said it's actually the 5th factor of production in Kenya. And corruption, as people say, does not fight back. Corruption corrupts back. Anytime there's a big scandal somewhere, a lot of money has been lost, those guys take some of the money and use it to corrupt the investigators and some of the guys who work for the agencies. That is why it's not easy to stop the bleeding. It's very hard to stop the money that is lost to corruption. Now, like we said earlier, the buck stops with the president. As much as, you know, the guys at the lower levels who commit corruption, it's the president who has to be very serious. He has to make sure when he wants to appoint guys to these positions, he's not influenced by anyone. Investigations have to be done to make sure the guys who are given positions are clean. That is when we can see heads rolling. That is when we can see action being taken. And that is when we can stop the money we're losing to corruption. Otherwise, it's going to take a very long time. Remember, it goes back to the 1990s with the likes of Aaron Mwau when he was the head of the anti-corruption agency. You know, there was a lot of excitement. Still, nothing happened because the big fish is never, you know, followed. No one goes after the big fish because they always use the money to do what? To get their way around.
Yes.
The chicken thieves, the guys who steal small amounts of money, will be shackled very quickly to prison. But the big fish is never prosecuted, and that's why corruption will always win. That's why we'll continue losing money. We have to be serious.
Let me bring Evans in. Evans,
and we have to stop. We have to stop going to the counties first before we clear the national government.
I think that's a debate we have completed in the first phase of this discussion. But let's talk about the multi-agency approach, Evans, here. And with regards to the Busia governor who's in question right now, this is a report that was, this is a file that was, you know, investigated by EACC. They had forwarded it to the Director of Public Prosecution. Of course, is the one who approved the prosecution of the governor in question. Are we finally seeing these agencies working together?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, one thing we have to know is that corruption demeans human rights and it undermines the rule of law. And when you look at corruption as a threat, direct threat to national security, then you will see a lot of players coming in to be able to participate in trying to deal with this vice. And that's what we have seen even with the NYS. At the moment we realize, look at even what's happening now with the sugar, the importation of sugar that is not even fit for human consumption. Those are issues that are very clearly direct to national security and also undermines people's rights. So I think it's important that the multi-agency approach that is being now used is because we're not letting people deal only with one group of people, like dealing with the EACC only. And then when it fails, when it goes to court, it says we can't prosecute because we do not have prosecutorial powers. I think now we are seeing a very classical example of seriousness, not only from the president, but also from all our agencies. And that is how, I think that is the approach. And that is why Ojaamong has been netted. I think the seriousness with which the DPP has come in is what has actually led to this particular case. Because I don't think 2016, 2017, now 2018, the EACC was only investigating and gathering evidence. I think they already knew very well that they will never be able to prosecute anybody. They will never be able to so deal with the big fish. But we have a brave man in the office of the prosecutor, and I think we're expecting to see quite a lot of these corruption cases also being unfolding.
And now, Abel and Evan, let's be solution-oriented as we conclude this discussion tonight. Of course, corruption is happening both in the national government and in the county government. Of course, no corruption incident is good. Both of them are bad for the people. And I'm going to quote quote here from the National Ethics on Corruption Survey Report 2018 shortly. But Abel, let's be solution-oriented now. People talk about the need to instill values among Kenyans, the need to strengthen institutions like the EACC, like the DPP's office. I mean, it's never implemented. I mean, where's the problem here?
I think the Englishmen say, one swallow does not make a summer. We cannot talk about the success of the DPP working together with the SEC because of just one case of 20 million. Back to your question. Now, corruption is about, I think, the nature of our education system. Right from, primary school all the way to secondary school, we don't emphasize the negative side of corruption. And actually, after maybe you've cleared school and you begin looking for a job, everywhere you go, you're told, hey, you have to check some small amount of money maybe to secure employment and all that. So corruption gets glorified. The moment you get to a national office, you don't have the ethical background to fight against corruption. That is the starting point. And we have that very weak foundation or background which does not prepare us to fight corruption. So by the time you begin, teaching government officials on how not to be corrupt and all that, what you're doing is to treat the symptoms and not the disease itself. So our education system has to be configured so that when kids come up, they understand that corruption is actually lack of what? Patriotism. In places where corruption is very, very, very low, like the United States, guys from the ground are prepared knowing if I steal from the government, I'm hurting myself. That is what is happening in Tanzania. Kids grow up knowing if you steal from the government, you're hurting yourself. So we lack values. And we cannot solve it when we're fighting corruption up here. We have to restructure our education system. We have to instill values from the ground up.
Well said, Abel. As we conclude our discussion, Evans, we've had that part of solutions from Abel there. Clearly, there are a lot of solutions. Of course, they need to instill values among Kenyans. They need to make corruption expensive. They need to put punitive measures against the corrupt. I mean, why are never these solutions implemented? Why are they not there, in reality?
I think there's no academics about corruption. I think we need to copy the emerging democracies and democracies like India, Malaysia, look at the United States, where if you feel or your own conscience informs you that you need to step aside or step down. It's only in Kenya where you'll find a big official saying, I would rather die than resign. That is so ridiculous. You see, I think we need to start looking at other examples and borrowing from other countries where we take responsibility. The problem here in this country is that people do not take responsibility. Corruption, as I said in the beginning, it's been made an enterprise. The more you make money out of corruption, the more relevant you become. And you have seen people even out of corruption proceeds rising to higher heights, to other positions, where now they go in those positions to protect the wealth or the money that they have looted through corruption. So I think the best way to deal with corruption is not academics, it's not to teach people in schools. Corruption is something that people are engaged, it has been institutionalized. How do you remove it from that level? People must start taking responsibility. We want to see government officials who are willing to step aside and then letting investigation take place. These things are happening everywhere in the world. And if Kenya, the impact of corruption in our democracy, political corruption, where you see even politicians being bought in parliament. So it has become like our way of life. And I think for us to change that, we don't need to take anybody to a classroom or to teach us the one kid about corruption, but we need actually to make people get accountable and to make our leaders be able to be
Yes, Evans, many thanks for that. Clearly, this is a deep-rooted problem. We hope we're going to find a final solution to this one day. Many thanks for your input. That is Evans Wafula as well as Abel Oyeyo. Many thanks for your input there on a day. The Director of Public Prosecution approved the prosecution of Busia Governor Sospeter Ojaamong and 9 other county officials in connection with the irregular procurement of integrated solid waste management there in Busia County. Many thanks for watching. Of course, you have been watching the big story right on KTN News. My name is Joseph Ibrahim. Up next is KTN Prime with Linda Guto. Stay tuned. Bye-bye for now.